what I want to leave you with is three thoughts. Firstly, Kingspan. We're the world's leader in sustainable building products. And I'll explain a little bit about that to put things into context. How does cloud benefit us at Kingspan? Second point I want to make is, if you're not ready for the cloud, you're probably not ready for anything. One of the most interesting things about moving to the cloud is it exposes so many other issues and challenges with people and process and technology and everything else. So if you're not ready for the cloud, you probably have other issues that are getting in your way as a business anyway. And also this concept of sustainable cloud, that there are two major trends underway in the world right now. There are many other trends, but two of relevance here. One is sustainability, the switch away from fossil fuel, it's happening. And secondly, the switch to cloud. So these things are converging. They're not happening in isolation. We don't live in a univariate world. So to talk about this, I'll talk first about Kingspan's vision. Cloud in the context then of disruptive IT forces. So cloud is not the only technology change we have to worry about in business. It's a big one, but you have to put it in context with things that are happening with social media and mobility and big data and things. And then talk about 2017, 36 months from now, what will the world be like? So if you think about it, the world is changing rapidly. It is always an option to do nothing. Select option A, do nothing. So where do you end up in 3 years' time if you choose that option versus what are your better options? What's your best option? And then sustainable cloud. I'll explain what I mean by that. So to start with Kingspan's vision. So we're recognized as a global leader in sustainable building products, and the world is on a transition to sustainability, which maps into the whole business context for us at Kingspan. And there are 4 drivers for this change: climate change, growing demand for energy, the price of fossil fuel itself, and then energy security, particularly in Europe. You look at Ukraine, that's a problem that's been coming for a long time. We've known about energy security in Europe for a long time. Just to take those in turn, in July 2007, Lewis Gordon Pugh swam a kilometre at the North Pole. And it's shocking that anyone could have done that or survived doing that. And when you look at the amount of ice at the pole in the summer, the North Pole in the summer, it's down to about 20% of what it was historically. So prior to 1980, about 16,000 cubic kilometres of ice at the pole. Now every summer it's dropping consistently below 3,500. The planet's air conditioning system is changing. This is a serious change that will affect us all. 2012, largest ice melt in recorded history. The trend is unfortunately heading that way every year. Rising demand for energy. It's amazing to think that China, people now talk about China as surpassing the US in terms of GDP. It already surpassed the US in terms of energy consumption in 2009, in terms of new cars sold, in terms of cell phones in use. China continues to break records. Behind all of this, China is adding 100,000 megawatts of electricity capacity to its grid every year, this year, next year, last year. Germany's grid is 86,000 megawatts. China is adding Germany in terms of energy capacity every year to its grid. China and India together will add 23 Germanys at least by 2030. There isn't the fossil fuel to do that. It does not exist. If you grow at 7% demand by 7% per annum, you double demand in a decade, just using that as an indicator. China's economy grows by about 8 or 9% per annum. Now, if you think about peak oil, we view the planet has used as much oil in the past decade as it had done in recorded history up until 2004. So you think about, where's that going to take us where we're beyond peak oil? What's it going to do to the price? In 1997, oil was $9 a barrel, and a decade later, it peaked at $156 a barrel. What would happen if that happened again? You know, what might it happen again? Well, the U.S. military and Richard Branson certainly think that those are very likely threats to their activities. And then you think about security of supply. So Europe has a very, very sophisticated natural gas distribution system, courtesy of Vladimir Putin. We don't have the same when it comes to electricity. So we do not have the sophistication needed to move electricity around Europe. If we had large offshore wind farms, large solar in southern Europe, we lack the sophisticated electricity distribution that we already possess for natural gas. So something has to be done, and things are happening. European policy is moving in this area. So you say, well, okay, crisis, what crisis? In the Chinese language, which is written in pictographs, the pictograph for danger and the pictograph for opportunity together form the word crisis. So it's quite interesting that in Chinese culture there is an implied awareness that every crisis brings an opportunity, and it certainly does. In particular, look at Ireland's opportunity in all of these big changes that are happening. So you look at the big picture, Dr. Mark DeLucci, University of California, there's no reason why the world cannot currently run on sustainable, renewable technology. The only obstacle is political. There is no longer a technological barrier. So then just on to Kingspan. So last year, Kingspan's revenue was just under 1.8 billion euros, and only 4% of that came from the Irish market. So when you think about the recession back in 2008, the company would have seen a lot of disruption, but we've come out of that recession largely through export growth, acquisition of new business, and some degree of diversification of our product line. So our product, the Al Burj Tower in the Middle East, that's Kingspan's insulated panel product on that there. The traditional business began with an insulated foam product. We also have a large access floors business in data centers in North America. And then we have a whole range of environmental products. We have 7 product sets in environmental, and that's really where our smart products lie. So the topic of big data is now an issue for us as well to tackle. And then across the globe, as I said, 4% of our sales comes from Ireland. We have 62 factories across the globe. And 2014 has already proven to be a strong year for us. So when we talk about disruptive IT forces, again, think about in the context of Kingspan, what are these disruptive forces and how are they going to affect us? Well, it's always hard to predict the future. And I can never tell if this is a real photograph or if it's a joke. But either way, bear with me, right? Scientists from the RAND Corporation have created this model to illustrate how a home computer could look like in the year 2004, right? However, the needed technology will not be economically feasible for the average home. Also, the scientific reality, scientists readily admit that the computer will require not yet invented technology to actually work. But 50 years from now, scientific progress is expected to solve these problems. With teletype interface and the Fortran language, the computer will be easy to use, right? So big steering wheel here. And so it is hard to predict the future. But there is a sense, though, that the future is sort of happening faster and faster. It's the horizon to the next big thing is moving faster. Now, if you think about disruptive technology of the past, with the arrival of the aqueduct, Rome could grow to 1 million inhabitants at the time of the birth of Christ. The steam engine opened up North America, and the price of staple foods crashed as a consequence of that distribution network. Electricity has utterly transformed our world. So any disruptive technology makes a big change, and it tends to be persistent. When you then think of, well, what's happening in IT? Now, Gartner talk about the nexus of forces, one of which is cloud. This is back to my point, you cannot talk about cloud without talking about social media, mobility, and big data and information. These things are all happening together. It's been driven by the consumer. It's not being driven by IT anymore. So the demand and the creativity is coming from, a focus on what does the consumer want. And now that's permeating back into big business. So this whole consumerization, if any one of these things was happening on their own, it would be pretty serious and difficult to deal with. They're all happening together. So this creates huge opportunity and huge threat for traditional business models. So then looking at 2017, with all this going on now, so no one wants to miss the next big thing. We would hate to be the last person in the room to end up with one of these, right? Whatever that was. Obviously, this guy was thinking, well, I'm going to maybe be the first guy. I'm not going to be the last guy this time. I'm going to be the first to get it. But clearly, it's much better to have a rational approach to this as we look at innovation rather than maybe jump too early. So in Kingspan, what we're looking at is when it comes to cloud, it's very much looking at cloud as cloud first. When we look at our next major component of IT strategy, we're looking at email, CRM, how these things integrate with each other, but also how are they going to be platformed, how are they going to be bought and supported and everything else. So we look at cloud first. Similarly with mobility, our customer, our employees, it's all about mobility now. So the application services have to be accessible in that way. So from the perspective of e-commerce for our customer to buy our product, for our sales force to record and track opportunities, it's all about mobility. It's not about going back to the office to a big clunky PC anymore. The growth of data, because we have smart products and the demand for those smart products is growing, we are creating vast amounts of data now. And for us, cloud is the way to manage that, a big part of managing that. But there is this sense now that we are at this point in the world where the Internet of Everything is emerging. You know, when you look at the numbers that Intel predict in terms of where will the world be by 2017, enormous numbers for microprocessors. Social computing again, that you know, we're not relying on word of mouth to find out about opportunities. We're increasingly using social networks, LinkedIn in particular, Facebook, technology like that. On cloud, we're getting to this point now where it's everything as a service IT. That's the future. That's where the value is for us in Kingspan. How do we link everything together? How do we avoid CapEx? How do we move to a subscription service? We're nimbler. We're a company that's acquiring businesses all the time. We like to be agile in our decision making. So we don't like to invest heavily in an IT capital project which sticks us to the ground for 10 years. We'd like to be more nimble. But when you think about where this all came from, when people talked about virtualization of data centers back 10 years or more ago, that was really the first step in this journey. But when you look at where it's going to, it goes to this model of everything as a service. And what's happening then to the role of the CIO, there's this split underway where the CIO is splitting into two people. The back office CIO with the tapes and wires, and the front office CIO, business value from IT. And so the profession is actually starting to move in two directions. The back office CIO, there will always be people focusing on tapes and backups and everything else, but increasingly that will be coming from a cloud provider, not from people employed by Kingspan. So if you're not ready for this, if this is something in your business that you're not ready for, you probably have other issues looming large on the horizon. Where are you going to get the skills? Where you know, when you look at mainframes, they'll be around for quite a while longer. But what happens when you're unable to get the spare parts, even on eBay? What are you going to do then? What happens when the very last COBOL programmer finally retires? What's your plan for that? So kicking the can down the road or saying cloud's not for me, well, sure, you could be the last guy in town with a horse or the last person who repairs steam engines. That's fine as a business model, but ultimately history catches up with you. On the question of smart devices, I mean, look at how smartphones now, this is data from 2013, you know, over twice the number of smartphones sold in 2013 vis-a-vis PCs in total. So that's the mobility you know, message large there. Social media, of all the different options, these would be the 6 ones we would look at in Kingspan. LinkedIn would be the one that we would look most closely at. 240 million professionals, 35 years or older. Some people would say that LinkedIn is Facebook for grown-ups. But the way LinkedIn itself is marketing its capability and selling its services is incredible. And your CRM strategy and LinkedIn really need to go hand in hand now. The Internet of Things. The Intel Quark was developed in Ireland at Leixlip. Intel's head of innovation globally is Professor Martin Curley, who's based in Leixlip. And Intel are betting the shop on the Internet of Things. They see this as their next big opportunity, that edge computing, smart devices is the way it goes. But this will mean that the amount of data being generated is going to massively mushroom up in everybody's business and in society generally. And that plays into the cloud. So again, you know, you have to think about how does this affect your own business. You know, the future's already here, only it's not evenly distributed. There are people already at the forefront of this innovation. The Quark on the Edison board is the size of, you know, it could fit in the palm of your hand. And that's a fully fledged computer. We're looking at this technology now in Kingspan. We currently have about 30 different microprocessor-based products. we're looking at standardizing on Intel. By 2017, the world will have the estimates from Intel, 16 billion connected smart devices, massive amounts of data, how to interpret it, what to do with it, how does it affect your business. On sustainable cloud, so sustainability is hitting hard, cloud is real, it's happening. And then you think about, well, what about sustainable cloud? What might that be? This is again back to Ireland's opportunity. Sustainable cloud, the idea that the cloud hosting service itself is using sustainable energy, renewable energy in a sustainable building with sustainable energy distribution. These are the things that consumers are starting to demand. So if you look at Greenpeace, they do a Green Watch survey every year, and they publish it, and they target the big 20 IT organizations to look at their green credentials. So consumer-led pressure on vendor behavior is a reality. And the consumer wants to know that, increasingly wants to know that the supplier is ethical, that the supplier is sustainable. So with all of this, with all of these big changes, to quote Henry Ford, whether you think you can do something, or whether you think you can't, you're right. So that, creating the future is never easy, but it is something that in Kingspan we're looking at. We're looking at our smart devices strategy. We're looking at how cloud is at the heart of that. We're looking at our sustainability strategy as it pertains to the IT sector. So in a nutshell, we see ourselves as the world leader in sustainable building products. If you're not ready for the cloud, you're probably not ready for anything, and sustainable cloud is on the way. Thank you.